First of all, can you excuse me for not having my video on? Unfortunately, my camera is broken on the computer, but I hope you can hear me nonetheless. So thank you very much to the organizers. This organization plays a vital role organizationally and in Britain in attempting to rally people to oppose the new Cold War. And in terms of answering the questions, I will not have much to say that will add to what has already been said by Wang Wen, by John Ross, by Martin Jakes, and by others. A Biden victory will indeed change the new Cold War, but it won't stop it. The US approach is likely to become more sophisticated, comprehensive, but also dangerous. I want to focus on three questions. First, on Biden himself. Second, on China. And third, on Britain. Is there a potential role for progressive forces in Britain to oppose this war? Where can they be based and can they be strengthened? On Biden, I think enough has been said. He is rooted in the US State Department establishment. He served under Clinton and Obama, but he did so dangerously. He was always the hawk under Clinton, pushing for NATO intervention in the Balkans. He was a hawk under Obama, closely involved with Victoria Nuland in planning the coup in Ukraine, and then pushing unsuccessfully for NATO retaliation in the Crimea, an enormously dangerous thing. And he is today a hawk on China, as everybody knows, seeing China in highly ideological terms as a totalitarian challenge and seeking to confront China in the South China Sea, on Hong Kong, in Tibet, and Xinjiang. His approach will therefore be more sophisticated, ideological, and long-term than Trump's, and in particular seek to base it within wider alliances. This makes it particularly dangerous. Biden aims to rebuild US ties with the European Union and to redevelop US leadership within the NATO alliance, and do so very much more on ideological terms as defender of the world's free market democracies, as he will state them. He will seek to assert US leadership on climate change and revert to Obama's policies in the Middle East and revive, probably, though not necessarily, the nuclear deal with Iran. He may well also back away from Trump's alignment with the most reactionary forces in both Israel and the Gulf states, although that very much remains to be seen. And it will be on this basis, as a champion of the liberal free world, that Biden will continue the new Cold War. And he will pose it in terms very much of democracy against totalitarianism, not in terms of economic competition and a square deal like Trump. He may well revive earlier State Department perspectives of seeking to exploit internal divisions within Chinese society around these issues. And on past record, he will do so dangerously. Russia will also be a target, probably with Belarus in the front line. The issue will be posed there also as democracy against totalitarianism, and with the newly re-established alliance with the EU being used to strengthen expansionist economic ambitions in both Eastern Europe and also in Africa. So we face a very dangerous future and no immediate end to the new Cold War. So what of China and China's role? The question of a Thucydides trap has been posed repeatedly, and as what makes war a rising possibility. I think there may be a danger of being trapped by the term itself, because the term and its author derives from the US State Department, from the US policy establishment. Graham Allison was a Defense Department advisor during a number of administrations, but particularly during the dismantling of the Soviet Union. He is likely to argue for a similar approach today, and his advice will be to strengthen those seeking an ideological challenge to exploit divisions within Chinese society, to use wider international agreements to push for opening China's economy even more in ways that would disrupt the overall socialist direction of that economy, and to unite the NATO alliance on these ideological terms. It will be offered in the spirit of avoiding war, but together with Biden's past record, it makes for a very dangerous ideological and political combination. And of course, the Athens-Sparta analogy is a very false one, probably deliberately, because it obscures a key reality. Athens and Sparta were both slave societies, both had colonial empires and alliances that stretched across the Mediterranean. This is not the case with the US and China. One is seeking to build a socialist society, the other to sustain a capitalist one. And a capitalist one based, as we have heard from many speakers today, on the subordination of the global economy, on the control of international capital markets, and sustained by the international primacy of the dollar. It is indeed a failing society, plagued by extreme inequality and technological dominance that is now largely limited to IT, aerospace, and military technology. And it is one that depends internationally on the harshest forms of political and military intervention in the Americas, in Africa, in the Middle East, and Asia. There is therefore a direct and strong contrast with China. China needs peace. It is committed to peace. Its economic dynamism depends on its internal economy. It seeks joint development with its economic partners. It does not depend on exploitative relations or military force. And no less important, as President Xi has stressed, China now foregrounds its socialist character, the country's objective of developing a modern socialist society over the next 2 decades. And this, I think, is very important. In the aftermath of COVID and the current juncture of global development, we see the balance of forces and ideologies quite differently from what it was in the late 1980s and 1990s when Graham Allison and his colleagues in the US Defense Department were supporting the neoliberal transformation of Russia and Eastern Europe. I think Martin Jakes has eloquently portrayed what has happened over the subsequent 3 decades. On the other hand, China's economy is indeed dynamic. According to the IMF World Report for October, it will have grown by 10% over the next 2 years. And by contrast, the United States economy will have contracted by at least 1.2% over that period, not grown at all. And those of its potential allies in Europe will have shrunk by even more. There is every prospect that the unprecedented levels of debt within the capitalist world will result in even lower growth rates and greater crisis than in the decade after 2010. And it's not just a matter of economics. China's ability to survive the pandemic, as I think more and more people are seeing, and to do so without major economic loss, is a direct result of the character of its political system and its orientation. Because we have also seen a similar ability in other socialist-oriented societies, such as Vietnam and Cuba. China and its mass communist party has been able to mobilize social resources in a way quite unlike that in the United States or Britain or in the EU. All these countries have been ravaged by a decade of neoliberal austerity, by growing social inequality, by a loss of social provision, and driven by a capitalist imperative to maintain production, often in medically hazardous conditions. So this is not to say that a threat from a new Cold War on Biden's terms can be minimized, because China is strong. The expectations and character of Biden and his political project make it in some ways more dangerous than that of Trump. Economic parity between the United States and China will be reached sooner now as a result of the pandemic, and the consequential effects on dollar primacy will be seen within the current decade. That, I think, is why, for internationalists across the globe, President Xi's emphasis on peace and socialism is particularly important, that the two are insolubly linked. It rallies the potential of an international understanding that we are dealing with two different social systems, and does so at a time when the contradictions within the capitalist order will become particularly stark. It has the potential of rallying, therefore, a much broader and socially profound and genuinely mass-based counter-alliance to that of Joe Biden, and doing so on the basis of peace and coexistence. To come to Britain, finally.
Draw your remarks to a close, please.
Okay, I will, yeah. Biden spells bad news for the current Conservative administration that has been very close ideologically to Trump. And Biden has spoken out against Johnson's government's position on Ireland and the Irish border. And more fundamentally and strategically, Biden wants closer relations with the United States, with the EU, at a time when Johnson and his government is in conflict with it. So this is a time when Britain's economy is itself weak and among those worst hit by the COVID pandemic. And the Johnson government will undoubtedly seek to reinvigorate its links with the US under Biden, but it will face very significant objective obstacles. I don't think I can continue within the time that I have to make the arguments that I wanted to make about the ways in which there can be the opportunity for rallying the forces within Britain against a new Cold War. There are objective difficulties in terms of the Labour Party currently, and in terms of a trade union movement that is unfortunately fighting for jobs, and where much of the British economy in its advanced sectors are linked into a military-industrial complex. There are real difficulties here. But on the other hand, there are opportunities, particularly, I think, within the regions and nations of Britain, of developing an alternative political perspective that could be compatible with much closer economic links with China under the leadership of administrations in the regions and in Scotland and in Wales that are politically distinct from that of Johnson. And that is an area, I think, which is something that needs to be examined for the future.